big news in terms of Tom Lee's company taking a moonshot, as they call it, on OCTO. And if you think 72% in a day seems large, well, let me bring up the ticker for OCTO shares, because those are up at the beginning of the show today. It was up 2,500. We'll call it 2,487 to be exact. What is going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Coinage. I'm your host, Zach Guzman, coming to you live from our Brooklyn studios here in New York City. And it is an exciting week as we have a lot of news to dig into with brand new digital asset strategy companies, including one in which we are seeing one of the largest ETH digital asset treasury companies, DATs, invest in a new Worldcoin DAT. So a lot to dig into today because we haven't necessarily seen that before. And when we have not necessarily seen a 2,500% increase in those shares. So that is what we saw play out this week. So a lot to dig into today. Thank you for joining us. Per usual, if you like the show, throw a like on it, retweet it, get some more people in here. And throw some comments on this as well if you have any questions for us to discuss, because some of the stuff is increasingly getting a bit more confusing than usual, but exciting nonetheless. So why don't we kick off the show with just that, digging into the news, and as we always do, starting with the price structures we're seeing play out. Over here on the Ethereum front, 43.63 is where we're at. And as we're going to get into on the show today, obviously there are a lot of different drivers. It's not just the DATs to keep tabs on. It's also the likes of some of the token launches that we've seen play out that tie back into these things, including World Liberty Financial and the DAT Alt 5 Sigma, which we're going to show in just a second. But just want to really kick off with the pricing structure we're seeing there on ETH. Bitcoin as well over on that side of things, back up above 112. So that's good when you, I guess, factor in kind of some of the majors and what we're seeing play out. Of course, all of this can change. Don't hold us to these prices, because this week we're also going to get updates on the inflation front heading into that all-important Fed decision that, of course, will swing markets one way or the other. The reason why the inflation numbers are going to matter when we get them on the 11th is because, of course, Fed Chair Jay Powell now has to straddle both what is a deteriorating jobs market with the idea of an uptick in inflation. Obviously, if those numbers come in hotter than expected, going to hurt the idea of him being able to cut without some consequences. And so all of those things are important. And of course, we talk a lot about the majors, but we're also going to highlight one of the miners, if I can call Worldcoin that, because it's up 71% on the day. Just looking at that week chart, this is what we're seeing play out as I said, a new DAT to take account to on that front, with another one of Wall Street's most colorful figures, shall we say. Dan Ives over at Wedbush now jumping into the DAT game as well, with the support of none other than Tom Lee. So we're going to dig into all those things. But first, it's not just those DATs we have to account for. It's the first big boy on the Solana side. I want to bring up that because we did, I think, highlight this a little bit before. But this is now official because we got the press release from Forward, the new Solana DAT being led by Kyle Samani, managing partner at Multicoin. Of course, we just had an interview with Kyle on Coinage not too long ago, digging into his thoughts for where Solana goes, how they're keeping pace with everyone else in the Solana DAT space, as well as all the other DATs outside the Solana space. So there's a lot to dig into here. But most importantly, I think is mostly just the news at the top, that you got some big players included with Kyle on this one. Galaxy and Jump Crypto, not just Multicoin by itself, are really the players in this one. And it's a big boy, ladies and gents. It's a lot of cash that we're talking. And the size of these do matter. I mean, like, look, not only is it how much money you have involved in these DATs, it's also who you have involved and what they plan to do with that capital. And maybe some people are kind of pointing out that, look, a lot of times the numbers are large, but it's really not the fact that you're getting buys from the open market. But at 1.65 billion, that's a pretty big start. It's going to be the largest Solana-focused DAT yet. in terms of their initial raise. Of course, as we've highlighted on the show, they're not the only DAT, but that is going to be a significant size to account for. Question becomes what those buys then do to the price of Solana, which I guess we can bring up that chart as well, because Solana is the one leading the pack, up 8% on the day as that news becomes public. It was something that was floated. We saw some initial reporting on Friday, but nonetheless, clearly matters more once it's actually official in terms of where Solana's pricing is moving. Back above 215. If we zoom out a little bit more on this chart too, just want to show kind of what things have been like. Obviously a ways to go to get back to the year highs over here at 250, but chugging right along. And obviously, again, depending on where these coins are going to come from, it's not surprising, I don't think, to see Kyle attached to this as well. Reason there being is Multicoin, one of the biggest backers of Solana. And if you watched our recent interview, we chatted with Kyle Samani, now the chairman here, attached to this, about why he thinks Solana's time to shine is now. And just want to play a little clip from that interview with Kyle to dig into why it is the time to triple down, I guess, for him, on betting on Solana now with a new DAT. Take a listen.
Today, Solana is the only first-class citizen in addition to Ethereum. There isn't another first-class citizen that has like global acceptance from all of the kind of major players around the world.
Yeah.
For a long time, if you were in crypto, it seemed impossible for anyone to get there because Ethereum was so dominant and it was so hard to get all those pieces together. The reality is that the Ethereum guys just totally missed the mark. They didn't scale. Gas fees spiked through the roof. People got really pissed and they said, okay, like these guys don't care about my user experience. I'm going to go elsewhere. And Solana was really the primary beneficiary of that. Today, average, median transaction fees on Solana are a tenth of a penny, even when you've got tens of thousands of TPS running through the system, even through Trump coin launch and stuff like that. And so the thing that I just wonder about for all of these new L1s and L2s is like, well, what's the reason for your system to achieve escape velocity and become something that is kind of a global first-class citizen beyond cheap and fast?
Yep. So global first-class citizen beyond cheap and fast, getting harder and harder as these majors now have bazookas behind them with DATs at this size, and of course all the big players. That also includes the other Solana DATs, I should say, including the likes of Pantera's backed various different plays on DATs as well. So all those things, if you're one of those other smaller players, getting harder to play catch up. And of course, I don't think enough people talk about some of the risks of DATs around newer tokens, but we're going to dig into those in a little bit on the show. So I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. But we'll leave that there for now because, of course, Solana is only one of the things to keep track of, and including one of the only DATs to keep track of. Let's go back to the granddaddy of them all because Michael Saylor was back with some more buys at his, of course, the DAT that kicked off all the DATs, being Strategy, with another buy of $217 million. It's almost, I don't want to say this. I don't think it's fair to say. I don't think it's boring to cover Strategy buys, but certainly he's been doing it for years, so there's not too much new to cover there. Even perhaps, by the way, when we talk about some of these other DATs, maybe not too much to cover there, but guess what? We do have something new coming from the likes of BitMine Immersion Tech. Of course, that's Tom Lee's Ethereum digital asset treasury company. And not only do they continue to stack ETH, that's kind of the news. Par for the course would be to get an update in terms of the DAT continuing to stack, now holding a combination of cash and ETH at 9.21 billion. But beyond that, big news in terms of Tom Lee's company taking a moonshot, as they call it, on OCTO. That is a different DAT. And I want to bring up that press release because it's Eightco Holdings, ticker OCTO, a $250 million private placement with an additional $20 million coming from the aforementioned Tom Lee ETH DAT BitMine to start the first Worldcoin treasury strategy. And that is why, as we hit off the top of the show, why you're seeing Worldcoin jump 72%. And if you think 72% in a day seems large, well, let me bring up the ticker for OCTO shares because those are up almost, at the beginning of the show today, it was up 2,500. We'll call it 2,487 to be exact. But that is a serious move for the Dan Ives-led new Worldcoin digital asset treasury company. There's too many of these things now, to be honest with you. It's hard to keep track. Coinage is turning into a DAT show, which is not necessarily what we always wanted to be. But unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, depending on if you're a bag holder or not, that is where the momentum is going. A lot of money flowing into these DATs, buying up the tokens, and generating the headlines. And I do think, at least when it's something like this, it's important to highlight because it's new, and it also, depending on what we see play out, could continue to grow on itself. I think Dan Ives, for those who don't know, if you're coming more from the Web3 side of things, Dan Ives is one of the most colorful folks on Wall Street when it comes to tech analysts, always wearing flashy neon shirts and the like. A lot of salmon pants I've seen in my days interviewing Dan Ives. And then I guess if you're coming from Wall Street, you might not know too much about WorldCoin. So I would direct your attention to our coinage explainers on WorldCoin, because we had the little orb actually in our studio not too long ago, and I got my eyes, well, actually one of our producers did because I didn't want to do it. But we have covered what WorldCoin's all about. It's the Sam Altman-backed project trying to bring proof of humanity on chain. So I think, look, this trend is going to continue. You'd expect a lot of other cryptos to continue to see pops like this, maybe not as large, but I can tell you, as someone who's in conversations with a lot of these ecosystems, there is a continued and long search for different people to lead these DATs. And I do not think that's going away, at least for the time being. And I say at least for the time being because I do think it is important to perhaps highlight some reporting that was really good from our friends over at DL News. So I just want to bring up that story because you might say, hey, Zach, how many of these things do we have at this point? And to be honest, it's really hard to keep track, but DL News out with another article kind of digging into this and looking at some of the risks around some of the DATs. So I'd direct your attention to that one. But some of the call-outs on that piece include the fact that now 1 in 3 of the 172 publicly listed Bitcoin DATs, those who are trying to copy Michael Saylor with what he's done at Strategy, 1 in 3 are now trading below a market net asset value, or NAV, MNAV, of where they should be in terms of just the Bitcoin that they hold on their balance sheets. And if you're curious about the number, I was kind of surprised to see Pedro highlight this. Shout out to Pedro. It's been a while since we've chatted with Pedro on Coinage. 200 public companies accumulating Bitcoin, and in terms of those 200, I think it was just in the last 30 days, so this is what he highlighted here, in the last 30 days, 22 new firms have begun a Bitcoin treasury strategy. So that's a lot, even just within the last month. And as a lot of people are speculating, if these things continue to pop up, if they continue to have to compete with each other, it may be the case that a lot of them will continue to see shares under pressure because it's hard to sustain the attention the way that Michael Saylor has. If you're not first, you're last, to quote Ricky Bobby. And as these things continue to come out, the competition is going to be severe unless you're the first in these ecosystems. And even then, to be honest, if the underlying token doesn't perform, you're kind of screwed as well. So just wanted to highlight a little bit of everything happening there on the DAT front. Clearly still impactful here. And congrats to Dan Ives as he jumps in with the support of Tom Lee. So very much Wall Street supporting Wall Street on these DATs as well. So those are the important DAT high-level stories to account for. As far as other high-level stories to account for, there are certainly other ones in that vein that I want to bring up as well, because as we've been highlighting, the SEC, if you haven't noticed, has shifted quite crypto-friendly. And on that front, the big headline out today is that the Nasdaq is filing to get the SEC to come on board with tokenizing securities. Now, this is something that we've certainly covered before. This is also something that some people said would probably take a long time to happen. And even just like a couple months ago, to be honest with you, people are saying, look, yeah, we're seeing a lot more tokenized securities. We're seeing stocks move on chain, but that doesn't mean that we're going to see the big boys, the NASDAQs or perhaps the NYSEs even of the world, want to do this. Well, you kind of got to think again, because the NASDAQ has now come out and said that They're asking the SEC for permission. Unclear exactly how long it might take the SEC to say, hey, we're fine with that. But if you do recall, we did hear from SEC Chair Paul Atkins not too long ago talking about doing exactly that with Project Crypto, saying that the SEC needs to jumpstart and kick these things into high gear. Just want to play a little bit of what we heard from Paul Atkins, because if you listen to that, this headline should not be a surprise to you, because even he has been calling for tokenizing securities. So take a listen. I think this was just like a month or two ago in one of his big first speeches on Project Crypto, unveiling Project Crypto, and why the SEC wants to take a front seat approach to getting the U.S. to become crypto capital of the world. Take a listen to what we heard from Chair Atkins.
While the Commission staff works to finalize these regulations, the Commission and its staff will, in the coming months, consider using interpretative, exemptive, and other authorities to make sure that archaic rules and regulations do not smother innovation and entrepreneurship in America. Many of the Commission's legacy rules and regulations do not make sense in the 21st century, let alone for on-chain markets. The Commission must revamp its rulebook so that regulatory moats do not hinder progress and competition for both new entrants and incumbents to the detriment of Main Street.
So I think we're at an interesting crossroads now, because obviously, as he said, there are risks in doing some of these things. But you don't want to hold off so long that, again, if Trump wants it to be crypto capital of the world, then you kind of do need to move quicker. However, I do think it is important to kind of talk about how slow some of this stuff moves. Even if the SEC gives green lights for some of these experiments to move on chain, it still may take a long time for the plumbing to be ripped out, or at least from what we saw in the Nasdaq release here, it's not going to be that plumbing's ripped out. These things are going to trade side by side. So you'll have your on-chain securities with your off-chain securities and the like, but at least developing both systems by, according to what Nasdaq said, the end of the third quarter of next year. So it's not going to be immediate. Of course, again, the SEC and everyone else has to work through this. The regulators need to figure out what's going to happen here. But still pretty crazy to think about. Q3 of 2026, I'm not sure at the beginning of the year, even after we knew a Trump admin was going to be super crypto friendly, how many of you guys would have said, hey, we're going to have tokenized securities potentially by Q3 26? And obviously, again, depending on which chains and where this all goes, that's going to be the important thing to start to consider. All right, how does that fit into some of these things? And a lot of ecosystems, certainly as we've been highlighting over the last few weeks, a lot of ecosystems have been playing catch up in even establishing the relationships with the big power players on Wall Street. Of course, as we covered with Etherealize's CEO, Vivek Raman, not too long ago, that's essentially why the ETH Foundation stepped up, really creating these on-ramps for a lot of these different companies to build on ETH rather than Solana. So I think that those things are important to check out as well. All those interviews live at Coinage.media or on our YouTube page, so you can check out things there. Also, I think that there's some news we've been covering for quite some time on the Worldcoin front to catch you up on. Sorry, not the Worldcoin front. Misspoke. World Liberty Financial front. And I think one of the big interesting things to see play out there is that last week we saw Justin Sun, one of the big backers of WLFI, see his tokens get frozen and has been in a public battle on Twitter to get those tokens unfrozen. And that didn't seem like there were too many big updates, to be honest with you, around it, which is just kind of like everyone's sitting there trying to figure out what's going to happen. Interestingly, even though there weren't any updates, I did see Justin Sun tweeting about his own stablecoin, which is perhaps maybe a shot across the bow. But just want to bring that tweet up because he obviously does have USDD. And that one is what he was talking about this morning, talking about USDD, not the World Liberty Financial stablecoin USD1. So I think that the drama there is public and kind of wild to think. Justin Sun threw in like $70 million that we know of in terms of investing in World Liberty Financial. And to see him kind of have to come out and essentially write an open letter to get his tokens unfrozen, that's some drama that's even big for crypto. And so it's kind of weird to not have an update. World Liberty Financial was talking about why they need to do some of these things. They didn't mention Justin Sun specifically. But again, to see someone who has put money into a project like this have to write an open letter and call on the team to unfreeze his tokens, that's just good TV. I mean, that's good stream fodder right there. It makes my job easy because just following the drama of it all is honestly pretty good. You got to tune in for that. So you got to follow Coinage if you want all the updates there. But pretty interesting to see that. And of course, obviously, for World Liberty Financial, they, in their kind of long thread, want to get back to building and making announcements of what they have to come. If you haven't watched our mini doc on why they probably have a lot of things to come, I would direct your attention to that one as well. But I'd be remiss, at least, if I didn't show some of that thread in what World Liberty Financial is trying to do to assuage the fears that they're going to go around blacklisting other people. And there were other people talking about being blacklisted. So, you know, this is a fear that we've raised before with other more centrally run projects. And, you know, the existing stablecoins aren't necessarily unique in that regard either. They've been working very closely with government entities around the world to freeze funds, whether it's Tether or Circle's USDC. These things happen when they know about criminals and they need to freeze funds. That's what they have signed up to do. And that's what makes Bitcoin distinct from a lot of these projects as well. So those are important things to flag, I think, at least in the early days of USD1 as people are watching that play out. But in general, the token so far still continuing to hold around that $20, 21 cent, 21 cent level. Of course, they did issue tokens in that for private accredited investors here in the U.S. At 5 cents last year. So still up significantly, as Eric Trump has been wont to remind people as well. So we'll continue to track the drama around Justin Sun and WLFI. But outside of that, there are some other things that are coming from big projects still in the ETH space. I know we've talked a lot about Solana. I know we've talked a lot about Worldcoin. For all the ETH maxes out there, I definitely need to flag what is coming out this Wednesday. Although some people aren't exactly pleased either around what we've seen with how this is being launched. But Linea's token generation event, the TGE, long awaited, coming out on September 10th is the update there, which will be a Wednesday. And kind of surprising to see the way that they're rolling the token out. Some people were flagging on X. They're not too pleased with the idea of the token leaning into a Binance relationship to get going, with the token airdrop coming from Binance Alpha. Obviously, Linea is the one backed by Joe Lubin, the consensus layer 2. More aligned, they claim, with the original ETH vision. Going to be burning tokens based on how much ETH is used. So kind of surprising to see them lean into maybe needing to work with a Binance Alpha to basically have an airdrop situation. But September 10th, I know a lot of people have been waiting for this one. This is going to be one to keep your eyes on, I think, just to get a good sense of what demand looks like for a launch this large, for one of those big players in the space, for a Joe Lubin type back project. To see what happens with a token launch like that, I think is going to be pretty important just to know where in the cycle we are, where demand's at. Because, of course, as I've stressed, a lot of this stuff can be gamed. When you're dealing with DATs buying up tokens, you're dealing with, I don't want to use the M word here, but some of these markets are not necessarily, when I use manipulated, they're not manipulated in a criminal, fraudulent intent way, but manipulated just in the sense of you can't necessarily rely on numbers and stats the same way that you may have been able to rely on them in the past, because some of this becomes warped. Maybe warped is a better term to use than manipulated. Our lawyers might be friendlier with that. But some markets are becoming distorted, warped by some of those purchases, and it becomes tricky, which is why maybe, I guess, it's worth highlighting and pointing out that there are other IPOs that are still coming down the pike. That includes the likes of Gemini. And that's one of those ones that I think will be important to keep our eyes on as well, because as much as we talk about all the other things, whether it's, these prices on the tokens themselves, some of the excitement still comes down to just the idea of these exchanges going public and IPOs. Of course, we've seen the excitement on Wall Street when it comes to Circle and their IPO. We've seen the excitement when it came to Bullish and their IPO. But now we've got Gemini heading out for their IPO. And I believe people are pointing to September 12th for that one. And so September 12th would be a Friday. Friday IPO, a very interesting time, if that is when they come out. Interesting time for it to come out because, I don't know, Friday IPOs are hit or miss. You lose some of that enthusiasm into the weekend. But where that price is going to be a big indicator, I think, as well. Whether you think the Linea token drop is going to be a big indicator for where we are in the cycle and how much enthusiasm is still there, or if you think perhaps the Gemini IPO might matter more when it comes to Wall Street and traditional finance, saying they're still excited about crypto. Both of those things definitely matter. And I guess just to wrap up the show on that front, there was a little bit of disappointment in terms of strategy not being included in the S&P 500. But guess who was? That would be none other than Robinhood. And today we are seeing shares in Robinhood pop 14%. And so I think that that's an important one to highlight as well when it comes to TradFi. It's kind of like the way that we open the show. We open the show with, hey, look, there's a lot of things happening in crypto that are now impacting TradFi with the DATs. But if you think that's big in terms of these worlds colliding, well, I think also being included in the S&P 500, pretty large as well. So all of those things are important to track, as we do here at Coinage, as being one of the brands trying to keep Web 2 and Web 3 and the intersection of those worlds together. But pretty big pop for Robinhood. And as much as there was disappointment around strategy not getting included this go around, pretty important to highlight that Robinhood is now being thrown into the S&P 500 as well, because Robinhood is increasingly tripling, doubling down on crypto as well. So all of these things are important. But what did we miss? That is always the question that we like posing to you, the viewer, at the end of these shows as well, because Coinage is a community-owned outlet which you can co-own by minting an NFT at coinage.media. The call to action is yours. If we did miss anything, mint an NFT, hop in the token-gated Telegram and let us know. But overall, that is what we're watching this week. As I opened with, huge macro news to report, which we'll be covering here, as well as in our free newsletter. If you haven't signed up for that one, go to Substack and sign up for that. But it is going to be the 11th is when we're going to be looking at that inflation data as we get core CPI numbers out on Thursday. That'll let us know what things look like as we head into the most exciting Fed decision in a while, as Jerome Powell, despite all the pressure that he's had to face, he's just 9 days away, a little over 9 days away. So I guess technically that would be 10 days, depending on where you're viewing from. He's not too far away from that Fed decision. And of course, as we said, that's going to be the thing that could potentially spill markets, or if it goes the way a lot of people are expecting it to go, could be a huge boost in terms of the liquidity around Bitcoin and the rest of crypto. Certainly, of course, interest rates going down, generally a big boost for crypto. And I don't think there's any reason to suspect that would be different this go around. Just want to bring up the odds right now. You can use Polymarket. Call me old-fashioned. I like using the Fed Watch tool from the CME. And right now, the expectations are overwhelming that we will see a cut from the Fed. Most people expecting just your standard fare 25 bips cut. But some people in the camp that you might see more than that. So keep an eye on that number. Right now, an 11% chance that we might see more than that as of right now to kick off the week. Obviously, the inflation numbers are going to change a lot of that as we move through the week. But that is all we got for you today, ladies and gents. As always, you can head to coinage.media to stay up to date on all the big headlines in Web3. For myself, for everybody in the Coinage community, appreciate you tuning in as always. I'm Zach Guzman. We'll see you again soon.